Okay. Okay, so dealing with anxiety, we shall get started. Okay, so some questions here. Is anxiety genetic? Basically, yes. Anxiety is very heavily genetic, and as people know that if you have one parent with anxiety, generally people with anxiety either have a parent or a grandparent with anxiety, and that's because these things do get passed down. Now, obviously, there's something called epigenetics, and there's a lot of things that you could do, right? You're not necessarily born with anxiety, so it's not completely genetic, but yeah, we know that there's a very large genetic component. Now, genetics doesn't mean that it's fixed. That's a common mistake that people make. It just means that there's a tendency to express certain genes in a certain way, which increases the likelihood of anxiety, especially when people are not doing things to counteract that, right? So if you're not changing the tendency, if you're not changing the expression, then it can lead to anxiety, especially with a hectic world that we're living in. And, people should know that anxiety and trauma and mood issues, they tend to, and depression as well, they tend to go together. They're, it's under mental health. So often people don't just have one issue. It tends to be grouping of these kinds of issues. And that's why we have reports on not just anxiety. We also have mood report. We also have a trauma report. They're not exactly the same, but there are some similarities. So they can lead to many different health issues, right? So we know that, people with anxiety, they can live less longer because stress is the number one killer. It can cause cardiovascular issues, it can cause sleep issues, anxiety and stress. Stress is the difference between anxiety and stress is that stress is the product. I mean, stress is, in one way to define it is, you're getting incoming stimuli from the environment, but the way that your brain perceives that stimuli is it could either be in a calm way or a stressful way. When an individual has anxiety, they tend to perceive and take in the information in an anxiety inducing way. So anxiety is really, it's basically, it's a name for how there's different names for how we perceive the outside world, right? So there could be two individuals. One person can perceive something in a very positive light, in a very, relaxed way, and another person can have a panic attack from it. So, some person might do a startup, might have a startup, and they might be very stressed about it. Some people would be exhilarated by the unknowns, right? So you could have the same exact situation, but the response to that situation is very different. And so, that's why it's really a lot of it is very biochemical because, people are getting the same stimuli, but the brain's neurotransmitters perceive them. They cause the brain to perceive them in different ways. The biochemistry of the brain causes the brain to perceive them in different ways. Then it activates your amygdala, and it causes you to have anxiety and stress. And again, at the end of the day, if something isn't deadly, then it shouldn't really cause you too much anxiety. If you're going to live, if you're going to be okay, then most of the things that we're anxious about are not deadly. They're not going to, have some huge ramifications in the rest of our life, generally speaking, right? So there are some situations where that can happen, but generally speaking, that isn't the case. It's just, it could be we're insecure about something, but most of the time it's the way we're perceiving it. So having anxiety can dramatically limit your potential because there's a lot of talk around limiting beliefs, and I generally don't like these kinds of things. I think it is an issue, right? But I like to think of it in terms of more like if someone has an anxiety or they get stressed a lot, they're more likely to lead to limiting beliefs. But you really have to go to the root cause of what that is rather than try, mindset hacks, which which are kind of like band-aids and only very temporary. You really have to go to the neurochemistry. So, but if you're having a lot of limiting beliefs about a lot of different things, if you're very insecure, if that could lead to a lot of bad decisions in life. It could lead to missed opportunities. It can lead to just a lot of bad things, or missing out on a lot of great opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise normally do. So anxiety, it did limit my potential for a while. And there's different kinds of anxiety, but essentially it did limit my potential for a while. And I was very afraid to do a lot of things. I was very paralyzed by anxiety, and that was a big problem. And when I overcame it, I was able to do a lot more. Because again, people can be really anxious or stressed about many, many different things, and it's really how you perceive it. What your brain does to the incoming stimuli that is the most important. So it is very common, and it doesn't go away on its own. It's important to know that it's not something that you could just do a mind hack and it's going to go away. It's not something that you can, it's a chronic thing that you really have to change your brain chemistry in a long-term way. You have to develop a lifestyle and a regimen to change your brain chemistry. So it can be addressed with natural and personalized approaches. So while it doesn't go away if you don't do anything, it does go away. I mean, it can go away. It can definitely get better if you introduce natural and personalized approaches. So it's something that needs to be managed over the long run. And if it's managed correctly, then it's basically can be, you can even be in a much better situation than someone who never had anxiety. So here's some of the supplements I take for my anxiety. And, I take 5-HTP. And again, I want to, this is a personalized regimen. This shouldn't be something that individuals say, okay, Joe is doing this, I should do this. These are good recommendations in general, but you should look at some of your personalized recommendations and follow those as well, right? So in terms of the 5-HTP, what that does is that it increases serotonin, and I have a lot of serotonin-related genes. For example, the TPH2, which it creates serotonin from tryptophan. It creates 5-HTP essentially. And then there's a TERT gene, which is a transporter related to serotonin. And then these serotonin receptors. And so I have a lot of genes that I found in my reports, and that have to do with serotonin, lower, inefficient serotonin system. And so I started to take 5-HTP as a result of my genes. Before I saw my genes, I actually did not take it. I took it once, and then I said, okay, forget about it. But now I've been taking it every day for quite some time, since our mood report came out, actually. So that's it's something that I always knew about, but I didn't take it until I saw it was relevant for me. Lithium orotate is very good if you have clock genes that are related to mood. So this is in my mood report. Then there's butyrate is really good also for these serotonin genes. And it's also good for GABA related genes. I do have a GABA gene here as well, which is I should put GABA here for butyrate, but essentially butyrate is really good for serotonin, GABA related issues, and also GSK3 beta as well. And so butyrate is really, really good for me. I notice a very good impact from it. And you could either take it in the pill, and I also take it in a powder form. I haven't been able to get a good powder for a while, which is actually why we're going to be creating our own powder. Just it's a resistant starch powder. I've been taking it for many, many years, about like 8 years now. But I haven't been able to get a good quality powder, and I just decided I just stopped buying it, and now we're going to be producing our own because, basically it's something I want to buy. So, even if nobody buys it, I'll be like, oh, I'll just take all of it, whatever. I'm a huge fan of that. So, and then fish oil, butyrate is also really good for BDNF. Fish oil is good for BDNF and also some inflammation genes that I have. Zinc is good for GSK3 beta. All these, I found these in my reports, by the way, just so you know. And then there's CBD oil. I have a cannabinoid receptor gene. This is FAAH, and I also have CNR1. I didn't list all the genes here, but FAH and the CNR1 is why I take the CBD oil, and then there's the Bacopa, also helps. It helps with the GABA gene. So a lot of these butyrate will help with GABA as well. So a lot of these will help with more than one gene. And then Bacopa also helps with the serotonin. HTR is serotonin 2A receptor, and so that is why I take these supplements. And I've been taking these for a while. And I find them to be very, very helpful. Now, I also do some lifestyle stuff. We're going to go there. I try to get sun. Sun is also, and light is very good for the serotonin genes that I have. And this is the resistant starch shake. I've been taking this for so long, so I put it down there, but it's something I haven't been able to get a good one right now, so I just took a break. But I do notice a difference, so I do want to continue taking this. And then I exercise well. I think exercise is also important, not as important as actually some of the other things, believe it or not, but it is important. I find some other things more important for me. And then in the evenings, I'll do some blue blocking lights, and that's because melatonin is very important for my mood. That has to do with the oxytocin receptor and some other things. And CBD oil is also again good for inflammation. It's good for a lot of other things like the cannabinoid genes as well, FAAH and the CNR1. So those are some important genes for me. And if you think that the genes are very complex, then all you need to do is look at the prioritized recommendations. So you don't have to worry about getting too much into the weeds. I like to know these things personally. But yeah, so yoga and aromatherapy, it's also good for oxytocin and GABA. So I could put like lavender oil, and then I try to go to bed earlier than later. Not always that successful, but I try. And I find that's good for my mood as well. And I try to sleep as much as I can, which is usually about 7 to 8 hours. So weekends I'll do some cold exposure. That's useful. I haven't been doing it much lately, but it is something that is useful. I find it's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. And then I'll also play exercise on the weekend. I don't consume caffeine or alcohol, and I minimize plant-based lectins. And so my genetic results actually from the food sensitivity reports and some other things told me that lectins are not good for me. I already knew that happens to be, but I was able to verify it. Okay. Now, building your own gene-based regimen. You number one is you want to look at your anxiety-related genes, your mood-related genes. You want to download the reports. If again, I mean, everyone can do their own thing. I think it's very important to understand what your blueprint is so that you can know your biochemistry, right? I mean, you could just take random things, but it's helpful to understand what your brain chemistry is like, and to take things that are, more tailored to that, right? You want a personalized approach, but the recommendations there are good in general, and you want to find a supplement, diet, and lifestyle recommendations that will address your problem genes and that are good for anxiety. You don't just want to target the genes without making sure that the recommendations are good for anxiety as well. And you want to then track your changes as best as possible. And we can have a QA. I just want to remind, for people who came to the webinar, my team wanted to give a special offer, 20% off SelfDecode. Use the code COM20. So if you wanted that special offer, but I would like to get to people's questions, and I would like to talk about what issues people are having, discuss, different things, different questions. And so let me look at, we have some questions here, and I can stop the sharing right now. And me and Dr. Greg can answer some of these questions. You could also type in some new questions if you'd like, and we can get to as many of them as possible. So let's get through some of the questions here. Okay. So which supplements help anxiety? That's something we discussed. It's something that, you have to look at your genes, and also I mentioned some of the ones that help me personally. Is there, if I'm already taking anti-anxiety meds, will this interfere? So usually not, but it really depends on which ones. And let's see, are there supplements that help with anxiety? We answered that. Time restricted eating, role of caffeine. I think caffeine is generally not good, but it does have, it does depend on your genes. So some people have genes where it doesn't impact, and some people have genes where it does. In terms of time restricted eating, I think that's probably an individual thing as well. I don't know if there's a general broad approach, broad stroke for whether that's good for anxiety. What do you think about that, Dr. Greg?
I like the 16-hour fast, 8-hour eating window. If you're eating too frequently, you may lead to dysbiosis, and if the dysbiosis would lead to possibly increased LPS, which would be pro-inflammatory, which could exacerbate anxiety in some individuals. And that goes back to the butyrate thing too, because we want to make sure our gut microbiome is good, so we're making healthy short-chain fatty acids, good amount of butyrate. So I think just making sure we're eating within a window would be beneficial.
Right. I would agree with that. I mean, I think, it does depend on the individual, whether they have that dysbiosis, if there's, so it's not something that, I guess, if they have that dysbiosis, if their gut is healthy, then I personally, I mean, I do time restricted eating, but not too much on purpose, just because, I get a little lazy when I wake up to eat, and then I just eat later. And but I like to personally eat a good breakfast, and I find it just makes me more motivated for the day when I eat earlier. But you still want to stop eating later. Like, you don't want to. It could, if you're eating too late, like, you want to stop a few hours, about 3 hours before you go to sleep. So, okay. So what are the most potent natural forms of medicine available for severe physical anxiety symptoms like shortness of breath? So these things are, the physical symptoms, you don't want to worry too much about the physical symptoms, because, when you talk about shortness of breath, heart palpitations, shaking, these are symptoms of an overactive nervous system. So it's not about the symptoms as much as it's about calming the nervous system. So everybody has different symptoms of anxiety, and an overactive nervous system as well, right? Not everyone gets heart palpitations, but you want to go to the root cause, which is the overactive nervous system. What would you say about that, Dr. Greg?
I was actually looking at it yesterday that mindfulness meditation is one of the best methods for, at least for mindfulness practices. And actually, it was as good as cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a common thing that people are recommended for anxiety. So definitely mindfulness meditation. And if you can't find someone to do guided, there's several apps that you could use. One I like is Headspace. Another one is Calm. That will kind of just guide you through the mindfulness meditations if you're looking to kind of come down from a panic attack or some breathing episode.
Okay. And someone asks, best supplements for quick relief of GAD. What would you say about that? You're on mute, I think.
I'm sorry, they're looking for what? Glutamic acid decarboxylase? Is that what they're looking for?
GAD is, oh yeah, it stands for that as well. But
Oh, sorry.
generalized anxiety disorder?
Best supplements. Well, so I love herbs, and so one thing, there's lots of different herbs. They have action on the GABA receptor, and so I think just to make a note, GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Glutamate is an excitatory one. If we have an imbalance in those, we may have overexcitation without relaxation. And so lots of different herbs work on the principle of activating that GABA receptor through, there's a bunch of different subunits on the GABA receptor, but and there's several. And if you really want to dive into it, if you go to selfhack.com, they have a nice list. But just for example, a couple of them. So Scutellaria, skullcap, that's one I really like. Melissa officinalis, that's lemon balm. That's another one that has a GABA receptor activity. Ashwagandha. Kava is a really potent one, although you got to be careful because sometimes that could mess people up with liver disorders. And valerian is another good one. So there's lots of different herbs I like that are help to stimulate the GABA receptor. And that's my personal favorite means of kind of relaxing myself.
Okay. So somebody asked why methylated B12 and methylfolate can make anxiety worse. What do you think about that?
So you don't want to over-methylate because then you'll kind of throw off your methylation cycle. And so in those individuals, and also our methyl groups are going to be inactivating things that are excitatory, like whether it be norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine. And so we want to make sure that we have enough methyl groups to kind of bring those out of their acting cycle, but not so much that we're kind of pumping them up. And so, and one trick for that is niacin. And so one thing you could do is if you have too much methyl donors, niacin will kind of help to remove some of those methyl groups. Actually, when you urinate niacin, it is completely methylated. Another one I like is glycine. Glycine will eventually become trimethylglycine. And so it will actually remove those methyl groups. So if you feel like you're over methylating, niacin and glycine, two ones I really like.
Okay, great. So somebody asked, can old trauma create anxiety in the future? And the answer is yes, which is why it's something, it might be a good idea also to look at your trauma report. If you have your genes, I think it's a good idea to identify any genes related to trauma, because I do think that, these traumas can exacerbate anxiety. What do you think about that, Dr. Greg?
Absolutely. And sometimes there's a triggering event that may trigger a memory of something that happened in the past. And somebody may not even be aware, or, it could be repressed. And so not until that triggering event happens does that kind of come into their mind. And they might not even be aware of it. They just feel anxiety. And that's where if you go through with somebody who can kind of work through those emotions and have you recall, well, what was bringing up these feelings, would you then be aware? So absolutely it could come later on in life.
Yes, somebody asked, how does cannabis intake affect genetic susceptibility to anxiety? CBD is sometimes overstimulating for anxiety use for me. How do the endocannabinoid genes affect intake? So as I mentioned in the slides, there's the FAH gene, which basically increases it, when that breaks down the endocannabinoids. And CBD inhibits that. So CBD increases the natural endocannabinoids or natural cannabinoids. And that's one way that CBD is good. And it also, so it's possible if somebody's saying that it's leading to anxiety, it could be that they're taking way too much. Usually it's very rare that CBD causes anxiety. But it could be that if they're taking too much, it also blocks the cannabinoid 1 receptor, which in the short term could be good for anxiety. But in the long run, what it does is it increases those receptors. So CBD is kind of like also good for the long run. But in the short run, if you're blocking too many of those receptors, it could theoretically increase anxiety in the short term. But and but otherwise CBD is a good supplement, and you want to look at your genes for it and to make sure that it makes sense for you. Dr. Greg, is supplementing with GABA for a COMT AA genetic variant a wise thing to do, or could it lead to other issues?
Well, so there's several COMT variants, so I'm not sure which one specifically. I'm assuming that's going to be a slow COMT variant. And so I feel like you would be treating the symptoms. Well, it depends on what they mean by supplementing with GABA. If they're stimulating GABA or whether they're taking supplemental GABA, so it's kind of different. But that would kind of be treating the effects of the COMT, but really you want to target the COMT directly. A cofactor for COMT is SAMe. Want to make sure someone's not over-methylating if you're taking SAMe, but let's say you're not. I would say SAMe would be a more direct target for COMT rather than taking GABA.
Okay. What supplements or treatment for anxiety, stress, especially with Lyme issues and palpitations and no sleep, insomnia? So I don't think that the treatment would be very different based on whether an individual has Lyme or had Lyme or not. Either way, what's happening, it's messing up with the nervous system, and I think it's causing the anxiety genes to express. I think I would say that the same things would occur, right? So anxiety is very common to cause sleep problems and heart palpitations. So I think that you would want to do the same things, which is, you'd want to look for good recommendations and then also make sure that they fit with your genetics. So you can, you can look for the different reports on anxiety, mood, trauma, things like that. What would you say, Dr. Greg?
Well, so my question is this individual being treated for Lyme? Are they on medications to eradicate Lyme? And if that's the case, and I think that's good that they mentioned Lyme because sometimes anxiety is a downstream effect of something else someone is dealing with. And so you have to treat the cause, and the cause may be Lyme in this case. And if you're on certain medications, that could be depleting you in some vitamins and minerals that would actually increase your susceptibility. So I kind of view it as if you're on things that are depleting you, replete with vitamins and minerals. I think that's the best sure shot way without kind of interacting without medications with any herbs or anything.
So this individual asked that they have ashwagandha. They're taking a bunch of herbs: ashwagandha, andrographis, astragalus, 5-HTP, L-theanine, and GABA. And I'm curious as to what supplements might be more efficacious. Honestly, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but you do have to look at your genes. From what I'm aware, I don't just looking at these, I don't think astragalus or andrographis are very effective. For me personally, ashwagandha does not work at all, even though for a lot of other people, they find that it's effective. And GABA supplements do not work at all, and L-theanine does not work at all. So that's for me personally. These don't really come up in my reports, so that kind of makes sense. GABA, I don't think GABA itself passes the gut barrier very much. I've taken very large doses of it, and I haven't noticed any effects. So I'm not sure. Even if the report shows some issues with GABA, I don't think that would be the best thing to do. I would go with Bacopa or Relora, Hinokiol. These things, magnolia bark is the main herb for that. But so magnolia bark, and I personally like Bacopa as one of the best for GABA. Which GABA increasing supplements do you like, Dr. Greg?
So one thing I like to mention with people is parasympathetic versus sympathetic activity. Sympathetic is the fight or flight. Parasympathetic is the rest or digest. I'm taking I'll drink caffeinated things that will kind of stimulate my system, which is good because it helps me get up. But it's not good because it actually will decrease the parasympathetic. And there's actually GABA receptors in our intestinal tract. And so I'll actually use chewable GABA, which will bind to the receptors. And I find it's calming to my intestinal tract, which again, through the gut mediated means could help decrease anxiety indirectly that way. So I guess if you're going to go for GABA, maybe try the chewable and see if there's any benefits from that. Otherwise, again, I like to go back to making sure you're getting adequate vitamins and minerals, not excess, which can cause anxiety. And then the herbs are my preferred ones.
Okay. Somebody asks, how is estrogen and hormones implicated in anxiety? What would you have to say about that, Dr. Greg?
Sure. So for several genes, we need estrogen in order for it to work. And so one thing we haven't talked about yet is COMT and MAOA, which I think is very important. And so COMT is catechol O methyltransferase. It's going to help degrade some of these excitatory things, norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine. And monoamine oxidase is going to break down monoamines, which it's similar things that it breaks down. If these are slow, it doesn't remove them from our system quickly enough. And so you have elevated levels of these, which can be excitatory, which can lead to anxiety. If you have too little estrogen, if you already have a slow SNP for COMT or MAO-A, estrogen is going to make it go even slower. And so that's why you want to make sure you have adequate estrogen levels, because you will decrease the slowing of a COMT or MAO-A.
Sounds good. So somebody asks that they love socializing and they get extremely anxious. However, they get extremely anxious as if someone gave them a shot of adrenaline and it takes them a while to calm down. I think what you just said has an impact on this as well, because we know that people with certain MAOA variants and COMT variants, they could leave more neurotransmitters in the system for longer because they're not breaking down. And this could keep the brain excited, and it makes it harder to calm down. I know for MAOA specifically, there's genes that make it, basically one of the associations is that if somebody gets upset, it makes them hard to calm down. So you want to actually check out that gene as well, MAOA and COMT. What would you think about that, Dr. Greg?
So it was interesting. They actually used CBD in a study to test whether it helped people with socializing and social anxiety, and it was extremely effective. So I would say possibly consider CBD to see if that kind of helps.
Does anxiety turn into hypertension? Yes, it definitely can. One of the reasons why it can turn into cardiovascular issues. People are, I have another question here about cardiovascular functions. Again, can it lead to cardiovascular issues in the long run? I did read one study where people with lots of anxiety and stress, it's possible to, they can live 10 years shorter. And there's definitely a significant increase in cardiovascular disease. Now, you don't have to worry about that so much. So first of all, a lot of people are asking about cardiovascular, they're asking about sleep, and this kind of shows how the body's connected in different ways. So, you have an individual can have anxiety, they can have, they could be worried about cardiovascular and then all of a sudden they're worried about sleep issues. Just an FYI that SelfDecode does have a sleep report, it has a cardiovascular report. So if you are worried about these issues, we do have reports related to them as well. But in general, I think, there's a lot of talk about mind-body health. And I think making sure that your mental health is stable is probably the most important thing that you can do for your physical health. And so I think it's very important. And again, it's very hard to change. You can't just will to get rid of anxiety or any kind of, mental health issue. It's really just the way that your brain chemistry is interpreting the outside events that are coming into your brain, and it's triggering your amygdala. So you really have to change your neurochemistry. Someone asked, is anxiety emotional or physical? Again, I wouldn't classify. I mean, it has physical effects, it has emotional effects. It makes it seem as it has both. It's both. But the key is that whether it's changing your perception, and then it leads to a whole cascade of events after that have a whole bunch of changes in the body. Your cortisol, your HPA axis, your nervous system, they're basically connected to their whole body. And if your body keeps on thinking that you're running from a lion, your body changes in a way that makes it more likely that you'll survive in that situation. But it's not as good for the long-term health, right? You can have food sensitivities. There's basically a bunch of issues that can come up. So I noticed that it's very common that people get food sensitivities after anxiety as well. And we do have a food sensitivity report as well, just FYI. But I do think the mental health is really the starting point. You want to get that foundation, set. You want to make sure that you're as stable as possible. And the way to do that is to change your biochemistry. And it doesn't, it doesn't have to be only with supplements. Just to be clear, either it could be things like yoga, could be things like, whatever you find that your genes are telling you is good for you. I think it's important to try those things out. So someone's on a diet and the food cravings are so bad it's causing anxiety. The interesting thing about anxiety is it could come. There are so many different types of anxiety. A lot of people with anxiety don't even know that they have anxiety because they might not associate it with like there's typical symptoms, but then there's not typical symptoms, right? And then some people might get racing hearts, and they might not even realize that their nervous system is so activated, or that they have anxiety sometimes. Which is, you want to a good thing to check is your heart rate variability, and anxiety is probably a really good proxy of your sleep. If you're sleeping, like usually people with anxiety or an overactive nervous system don't sleep very well. And if you're sleeping very well, which I track my sleep every night, if I'm able to get like really good slow wave sleep, really good. It's pretty good in all aspects, and it's really important that my nervous system is balanced, or else my sleep will take a hit. And not only the short term, also the long term. You can build sleep habits. If I'm stressed a lot, or if I have a lot of anxiety, in the past I would wake up in the middle of the nights, whereas now I'm able to sleep throughout the night because my nervous system is just more calm. It doesn't just overactivate as soon as as soon as basically it's able to calm down. My neurotransmitters, my biochemistry is able to counteract the effects where, if certain things happen, then, you have neurotransmitters just staying in, and your brain is just overactive. It's not able to calm itself down. And again, that's not something that you can easily, that you can consciously control. Why do panic attacks happen at random times, not during the time when you are under stress? So this is a really good question. I like this. And the reason I like it is because it goes to show you that anxiety, so stress can trigger anxiety. There's no question about that. But anxiety also can trigger stress, right? And anxiety can also happen when there's absolutely no stress whatsoever. You could be in paradise and deal with significant anxiety, and you might not even realize it. This person's having panic attacks. They're probably not even realizing. They're probably thinking, "Hey, wait a second. There's no reason for me to be stressed. So why am I feeling like I'm having trouble breathing?" It's because the person's biochemistry is a certain way that they're not able to calm down and regulate their nervous system. And that causes changes in breathing, causes changes in a whole bunch of issues. And that's why you could feel like you're getting a panic attack. Is anxiety associated with cognitive decline? It certainly is. Yes, anxiety and stress and mental health is definitely associated with cognitive decline. We know that cortisol can shrink the hippocampus, the memory center, and even short-term anxiety and stress also have significant effects on cognitive function. Is there anything I can know related to menopausal anxiety and high blood pressure? So that if you're having menopausal anxiety, it probably has to do with your hormones, and we discussed some of that before. The nutrients that are depleted when stress isn't managed properly, and its relationship to anxiety. So one of the nutrients is magnesium, and I think that's something that people should look into if they're chronically stressed. Even if I'm eating right and some exercising is being done. Also, how COMT and MTHFR SNPs play into this. So we discussed COMT, and we discussed a bit of methylation, that how it impacts anxiety. So methylation does, it impacts all the neurotransmitters, as I understand. And so I think it's very important. What do you think, Dr. Greg, about nutrients and anxiety?
Sure. So I think you hit the nail on the head. Magnesium is a big one, and magnesium is a cofactor for a lot of the different enzymes or receptors that people could have genetic variants to. So if you have a certain genetic variant, you definitely want to make sure you're getting adequate amounts of magnesium. One example is oxytocin receptor. Low amounts of oxytocin binding can increase anxiety. And so another one I like is B6, and so serotonin is also implicated in anxiety. B6 for a lot of different reasons people could be deficient, and so I think B6 is another one that kind of if it's too low can cause anxiety. And then zinc as well. Zinc is a cofactor for a lot of enzymes. A lot of people are zinc deficient, and it's associated with anxiety. So
Yeah, and as Dr. Greg said, magnesium, if you have one of those oxytocin variants, right, and that is increasing anxiety, you definitely want to even be more careful about magnesium. And also we have a vitamins and nutrients, minerals report where you can see if you're more susceptible to different minerals and deficiencies. So if it shows that you're more deficient in magnesium, then you want to be even more careful about that, right? So the body is complex in a lot of ways. And so you want to sometimes get a holistic picture, but that's why we have these different kinds of reports to give you different perspectives. But and it's also good to know some basic things like magnesium. You can get depleted if you have chronic stress. So post COVID-19 syndrome, anxiety and depression help. This is very interesting because we do see some. I don't think post. This is like a lot of people have issues with post infection anxiety and mental health issues. And I think the reason is because number one is infections could be a trauma on the body and it responds in a way as if you're PTSD. And the biggest symptoms of trauma is anxiety and depression. And so we discussed that before. But so, yeah, you have to, an infection can trigger the trauma, and it also can cause chronic inflammation for some time, which can trigger the nervous system for some time. And when that happens, they make the genetic expression. They basically, you have your weak points in your genes that make you more associated with anxiety, more likely to get anxiety. And the triggering the nervous system with inflammation is one of the ways that makes a lot of these genes express more, and it can trigger kind of anxiety that you might not have otherwise, but you still want to target your genetics when you're dealing with these types of anxiety. How to stop anxiety from being felt in the body as physical pain. So this is an interesting thing because a lot of physical pain actually stems from mental health. And so there's a lot of genes. We do have a pain report, just FYI. So that's important to know. But there's a lot of genes that have to do with some of them have to do with the serotonin receptors. Serotonin is I think is one of the mechanisms where it's related to the mind and physical pain. What else do you know about, for example, as I understand, as from what I can remember, COMT, for example, is something that has an impact on physical pain, meaning the same variants that cause physical pain also are associated with anxiety. What do you know about that, Dr. Greg?
that was actually the one I was going to mention was COMT is one that if you have a slow COMT and you have elevated levels of these things, and as you mentioned, serotonin specifically, if that's too high, then you will feel the increased pain perception. And so you want to make sure your COMT is working good and being able to clear those excess neurotransmitters out of the way.
So can chronic fatigue ever be healed along with inherent anxiety? Interesting enough, we do have a chronic fatigue report, and there are some genes that are related to both, right? So the body's connected in a lot of different ways. So one of those is the HTR, the serotonin 2A receptors. They can cause fatigue, and it also is associated with anxiety. So there is an overlap, and also if you're anxious a lot, that can also make you feel tired in the day. So it's one of the ways that it can limit you, right? So if your nervous system is active a lot in the day, it can make you feel like, oh man, I'm like really tired, but what did I even do today? I haven't ran any marathons. I haven't worked like crazy in the past, 2 weeks nonstop. Like you might be sleeping, but basically it's like this weight around your neck that without it, you'd be able to have way more energy and do way more things with your life. So it's really important to keep that in mind, that if you're just getting tired, you feeling tired, your nervous system, your mental health definitely has something to do with it. I mean, not definitely, likely has something to do with that. It could be also you have chronic inflammation from something, but mental health, I find, is one of the biggest triggers of chronic fatigue. And also, when I had a lot of clients, I always asked them, what did it come after? And I asked them, they always, almost 90% of the time, they would say that they started to get chronic fatigue after a large bout of mental, like, stress and anxiety. And then that kind of dysregulated their nervous system, right? And their circadian rhythm, and it could, like, maybe cause trauma. And then after that, you can have, it could be longer term, right? And it could mess things up in certain ways. So mental health is something that people should definitely pay attention to. It's not something to just say, like, okay, this is the way it is. You want to make sure that you're doing everything you can, taking the most personalized approaches. Dizziness from anxiety and panic attack, that's one of the things that's, it's a common symptom from people with basically, the nervous system has a lot to do with your balance. And when that is out of whack, that could cause dizziness. A lot of people with dysautonomia or problems with their nervous system, they'll feel dizzy a lot. So, and also, when you have anxiety, it takes away blood flow from specific parts of the brain. At the very least, right? So your higher level thinking, like your prefrontal cortex, is not working as well as, your limbic system is more activated, and that's probably where the blood flow is going, rather than the parts of the brain where it's regulating balance, things like that. What would you have to say about that, Dr. Greg?
So yeah, I think that's one thing we need to mention is there's some causes of anxiety that could just be not as much as we would consider traditionally mental emotional. So for example, arrhythmias. And some people are saying, well, I feel these palpitations in my chest, and that could be a mental emotional connection, but it could be an arrhythmia. And so that's one thing you would have to rule out with your doctor to make sure that there was nothing with the heart that was actually causing those breathing episodes and the panic attacks. And two more things, hyperthyroidism. And again, there's lots of genetics that go into hyperthyroidism. Maybe you have a predisposition for having increased thyroid function, but excessive thyroid function can cause anxiety. And another common one is calcium dysregulation. And so if your blood calcium levels are off, that could also bring about anxiety. So those are three big ones that you would just want to rule out if you have an onset of anxiety, especially suddenly.
Okay, so somebody asks here, trying to figure out how to overcome a sense of doom. Even with successes, I can't even enjoy myself. I'm afraid to jinx myself, right? So, like I've been saying, I think the first thing in overcoming mental health is to realize that there's nothing that you can think about that is going to overcome it, right? You just have to approach it in a way that, hey, wait a second, what did I do today that is influencing my mood, right? So if your mood is not good, then you have to look at your, like, it could be that you're working 20 hours a day and you're not sleeping and your life is a wreck, right? Possibly. And so, I mean, you want to fix those things. Or you could, your life could be somewhat normal and you just say, hey, well, I just, I have anxiety. In which case that it is a biochemical thing. Either way, it's biochemical. But if you're not sleeping, if you're working 20 hours a day and you're not sleeping, and then you have anxiety, that's kind of like normal. Whereas most people's biochemistry will change in such ways to make you more on the edge, right? But I mean, everyone has some kind of everyone has the biochemistry that could make it's kind of like a bell curve Whereas like how much you have to push yourself or be in like very stressful situation to get high levels of anxiety, right? So, nobody's going to work 120 hours a week and just feel calm, right? It's just not going to happen. So, but on the other hand, if you have a normal life and you're just like, okay, I'm not overworked, I'm sleeping, or I'm trying to sleep at least, right? You're going to bed at a normal time, but let's say you could also be having problems with anxiety, so you might not be sleeping. The point is that the first thing is to make sure that you realize this is biochemical, and you then ask yourself, how do I change my biochemistry, right? What are the things that I can do? So you could do the generic stuff. If you want, we do have, you could look at generic recommendations. I think that's better than nothing, right? Or you could also look at which specific biochemistry is off. And I think, personally, I think that that's the best way. You want to know yourself. You want to know which genes are giving you issues, and then you want to try things to counteract those. That you also know are good for these mental health issues. And so you don't want to blame yourself, because it's really not something that you can control with your mind, or it's really a biochemical thing that needs to be changed with biochemically. And things like yoga, breathing exercise, a bunch of things can help. And a lot of these things have broad impact. So, it could help, it could help without looking at your genes. It's definitely possible, but you want to, if you want to, I personally feel that mental health is so important. There's no, there's no amount of money that can just say like, oh, it's not worth it or whatever. And obviously we're giving, these things are not out of reach. These things are affordable. But the point is that, these, you want to use the tools that allow you to overcome if you think about it this way, if you find things that help you, these things can really help you for the rest of your life. It's not just a one day thing. So even if it takes a while, I think it's very important to find those things that change your biochemistry in the right ways that allow you to live your best life. And so somebody asked here, are anxiety and fear always associated? There is a large degree of similarity, right? So the more anxious, more stressed, the more fearful you are usually. So it is very related. Okay. Now, someone asked about interested in anxiety and impact on tinnitus. We know that tinnitus is very connected to the nervous system as well. So I think there is probably a reasonable connection there. We do have reports on tinnitus and as well. So it is something that just so you should know. What do you think? Are you familiar with tinnitus very much, Dr. Greg?
Yeah, so I think two things. One, limbic system overactivation. And so if you have excessive limbic system, like your amygdala is overactive, that can subsequently lead to tinnitus. And also blood pressure dysregulation. And so if there's lots of blood pressure change fluctuations, that can exacerbate the tinnitus, blood pressure brought on by the anxiety.
Okay. Yeah, that's, I would agree with that. So somebody asked here, my problem is that I'm not anxious, but I get the physical symptoms of anxiety, which then makes me anxious. So in that case, I hate to break it to you, you are anxious, but we have a bit of a different definition for that, right? So anxiety you don't have to think that you're anxious, right? If you're getting these physical symptoms, it means that your body is not able to calm itself down. Doesn't matter if you in your brain think like you're anxious or not, because that's kind of almost there's different, how you perceive your current state is almost a different thing than your actual current state, right? So you can be in a very anxious state but not perceive it to be in that way. Your nervous system could be overactive, but you might not perceive that to be the case. So perception of your current state and what your actual biological state are could be very different. And what's important is to understand that if you have the physical symptoms of anxiety, then either you're having a lot of inflammation, or more likely your body's biochemistry is functioning in a way that you're not able to break down neurotransmitters. Your receptors are not working as efficiently as they should be. And so you need to do things to overcome that. Okay, so somebody mentions here, most of my anxiety seems from sleeping. I wake up with a loud heartbeat, and to anxiety often progresses to urgent need to urinate, and figured was related to biochemical in my body at night. After a bug bite last week, also waking with severe itching, wide awake at 2 a.m., then tired at 6 a.m. So this, I would say, is a similar thing. I think this is one of the things that I mean, I don't think you can emphasize this enough. It's not whether you think, it's not your anxiety seems from sleeping. Your body is not functioning in the way that allows you to calm yourself down, right? Your biochemistry is not functioning in the optimal way. And what happens is that naturally, when you wake up and it's 6 a.m., cortisol spikes. That happens with everybody. Your nervous system turns on. I mean, depending on your circadian rhythm, but essentially in the morning, your nervous system is designed to spike. And what's happening in your case is that you're not able to calm yourself down enough. And it's basically just spiking. It's overkill, right? And your heart's racing. And so, essentially, and that also causes the this kind of turning on of the nervous system also then causes you the feeling that you need to urinate as well, right? And so there's a chain of reactions happening, and what's important is that your body, even if you don't think you are anxious, or your body has the biochemistry where it's not able to calm itself down. What do you think, Dr. Greg?
So I'd also wonder about apnea in this situation. If somebody they're not breathing at night, that could cause anxiety. And sometimes that is kind of how it happens, is somebody will stop breathing and then they'll kind of come back, and then that there is a compensatory heartbeat increase to kind of get the blood flowing, because the heart is sensing that there's low oxygen in the blood. And so that's one thing. And then the second thing I wonder is also arrhythmia. Could that also be playing into it as well? And so again, I think as a rule out any type of underlying medical things. And as far as the apnea, you could get a sleep study done just to see if that is actually occurring. Rule that out, and then you could kind of move on to the other stuff to see what are the other factors that could be associating with that.
Yeah, and another thing is hypoglycemia. I forgot about that, right? So if you are getting hypoglycemic in the middle of the night, that could cause a bigger anxiety rush, right? Meaning like, yeah, hypoglycemia can trigger the nervous system, right? And so it could be a bigger trigger if you're getting that hypoglycemia at night, in which case you need to balance your blood sugar, right? So we have a blood sugar report. You can look at that. You want to do things that improve metabolic health. So there's not that many options though, right? And even, yeah, I think like blood sugar is a big one. And the ones that Dr. Greg mentioned are also important. Okay. So let us go. I want to go through, I want to answer some of the questions that we have here in the chat. Okay. So let's go through some questions here. Is it better to get my DNA test again? It's been many years and I don't know if I have access done by a local biotech company here in San Diego over 10 years ago. Better to just start fresh with you guys. Yeah, if you got it tested 10 years ago, you should get it done again. No question about it. They're probably only checked for very few SNPs. You want to get a normal sequencing. And right now what we're doing is we're actually giving you all the SNPs out there pretty much with so we have a basic chip, and then we do something called imputation, where we predict with over 98% accuracy the rest of your SNPs. So you get basically a file that's like way better than 23andMe. Can you comment about 5-HTP causing extreme nausea? Yeah, so serotonin can cause nausea. It's and that's because the nausea, the way you get nausea is through the serotonin 3 receptor, which is concentrated in the gut, and the anti-nausea drugs actually block that receptor, and so that's and ginger, for example, also blocks that receptor. But usually you can get by that if you're taking 5-HTP on a full stomach. So if you're eating a meal and you take 5-HTP, you can get around the nausea. If not, then it's just not the supplement for you. I'm taking Victan. Can I still take supplements you mentioned? I'm not sure about the this drug Victan. Are you aware of it, Dr. Greg?
I believe they're saying Vicodin, and what I would say to that
Oh,
is
Vicodin.
when it comes to I'm just assuming when it comes to stuff like that. So one, and there's lots of different websites that you can kind of look up to see if there's drug herb interactions. They could get really fancy, but I would say as a rule of thumb, you need vitamins and minerals. And so I would say that going with that kind of approach first and foremost, rather than seeing if you could take a bunch of herbs, would probably be best because there's less of a chance of interaction with something like a Vicodin.
Yeah. I don't think most. I mean, Vicodin is basically working on the opioid system, and the supplements are generally not working on the opioid system. I don't, or it's very, very light. So I don't. None of these supplements are actually working on the opioid system. I'd be very surprised if there was any significant interaction, but that's something you want to look at on your own. It's very hard to, be a complete encyclopedia. Amazing webinar. Could you tell me about L-tryptophan, particularly last webinar you touched on it? Personally, I like 5-HTP more. And again, L-tryptophan, 5-HTP, these are really good if you have the TPH2 gene. TPH is the tryptophan hydroxylase. It takes tryptophan and converts it to 5-HTP. So 5-HTP is more readily available. I just feel like if you take the tryptophan and you have those genes, you might not have as good of conversion, which the 5-HTP gets around it. And so, both of them should work, but I personally like 5-HTP better. As a former colon hydrotherapist, I agree less meals is best to tax on the digestive system. I don't agree with a long eating window of 16 hours. It's too much. My body can't handle it. I think that is important to realize. That is like something that is individual. Like a lot of people cannot handle it, right? And that sometimes can cause stress in the body. It can activate the nervous system. Sometimes people feel more relaxed on it. It's a very individual thing. Is 5-HTP good for those of us with this MAOA gene? Since the MAOA activity levels are already low and higher levels of the neurotransmitter could cause anxiety. So I want you to look at the reports in particular rather than necessarily specific genes. I mean, looking at specific genes is more of an advanced thing, right? If you have a practitioner that is guiding you, they can look at specific genes and make that determination. Otherwise, your best bet is to look at the reports and look at the SelfDecode blog. There we break things down in a much more simple, we break down in a much better way that everybody can understand it. So it's, I mean, unless Dr. Greg, do you have any off the cuff answer for that?
Yeah, so I believe that would be a slow mouth. That would, if that was what you're saying, I would need to look at that SNP they have there, R6323. But if that's slow, then how that would be causing anxiety would be elevating the levels of neurotransmitters because that enzyme can't clear it out. Monoamine oxidase, it oxidizes it, gets rid of it. And so in that situation, you actually wouldn't want to take 5-HTP because you should theoretically have elevated levels. And so I would want to again, you should look at all your SNPs really, because that's going to be how's your COMT, how's other things that are affecting these
Exactly.
receptors. And so I would look at the whole picture rather than just focus on one thing.
So is there a genetic connection to dealing with high cortisol? Of course. So, I mean, high cortisol is often just a symptom. It's just when your cortisol is already high, that means that there's a lot of other things going on in the body. It's not just cortisol, right? And it's really just a marker of your nervous system. I mean, it has some effects on its own, but it's a marker. There's a lot of other things besides cortisol that has an effect. And high cortisol does mean that your nervous system is overactive, and you want to find out why, right? So anxiety could be one of the causes, of course. Um, are amalgams mercury dental fillings a possible cause of anxiety? Um, Only, I mean, I would say that you should get your blood mercury levels checked. If they're not high, then it's very unlikely that they are cause of anxiety, right? Um, what would you say about that, Dr. Greg?
Yeah, we only have so much time on this webinar. We could do a whole several series of webinars on environmental exposures that would be increasing, not just anxiety, but a lot of other things. This is why you need to get the holistic picture and see what are the environmental exposures. Even something like sound pollution could be causing anxiety, right? Or something mercury will cause a lot of things in addition to causing inflammation in the brain, and that could lead to anxiety. So I would absolutely agree. You got to look at the whole picture. But that's one of many things that you could be exposed to that cause anxiety.
Yeah, that's 100% true. It's one of those things you got to look at the whole picture. If let's see, if anxiety is caused by TBI or too much environment stimuli, any supplements recommended for this? So that would go through. If it's caused by the TBI, then it does link to glutamate issues, and supplements that would increase GABA would probably help. And you also want to check for GABA related supplements. GABA related genes. So, for example, I can share my screen here, and just for a bit, and you'll see that. Let's see, 1 second here. So if you look at this post, you'll see that there's a GABA A receptor, and this is my score based on this gene, right? And so this is in the anxiety. This is on the blog, right? So here are my reports, by the way. And what I do is I'll go to the recommendations here. So I have my anxiety, my mood report. Is chock full of information. It gives you the variance here, and then it gives you a prioritized list at the end. So what I do is I'll look at, if I don't have a lot of time to read up, I'll just look at my prioritized recommendations. Here's the trauma report. I look at the prioritized recommendations, and then when I want to get more reading, I'll either read the report more, or I'll look at the blog posts here. So here, these are related to anxiety. If you look at this is basically, I just went here, I picked anxiety, and then I was able to filter them based on the you see the red is the highest risk, and you see, look what I have. I have this tryptophan hydroxylase 2 gene, and I have this GABA gene. I have an oxytocin gene here. And so that's why. And then this one has to actually do with the nervous system and cortisol. There's other genes here as well. I mentioned this one as well. This one I like, is important as well. There's other genes here as well, but these, it basically, it prioritizes the genes here, which are the higher risk. So you want to look at that as well. And so, for example, if we're looking at GABA, we were talking about GABA, and so here we see some things that can help GABA, and Bacopa is one of them, and this is the one that I like the most out of these. Right, exercise can also boost GABA in the brain, and so if you're having a TBI, that means that there's too much glutamate, and especially if you have some GABA-related genes like this one that are related to anxiety, then you see these are even not that common, 16%, 20%. So it's not that common in the population associated with anxiety and impaired stress response. That's why I need more GABA in my system. So you also get access to Self-Hacked, and I would like to emphasize that if you just type in Self-Hacked in pretty much any topic, you'll get a lot of information. So, for example, here, what is GABA? GABA benefits. But in this one, we're looking at this one, top 15 natural ways to increase GABA. You see by SelfDecode, and you see a lot of different things to increase GABA. So these are, you see this, it asked me to put in my email, and you get, as part of SelfDecode, you get access to this essentially. But essentially, like this is a, it's a semi-private database for people in SelfDecode. And so once you're already subscribed to, you already have an account, you can log in here. And so I want to just make you aware of that. But yeah, and then here's, there's recommendations here. Bacopa is also good for this gene as well. And I do take Bacopa. I think it's very helpful for me, and it also counteracts the effects in my genes. And you could see here, this is the oxytocin gene. Here are my genes here, my SNPs. And then here are some recommendations. There's things like magnesium as well, avoid magnesium deficiency. And so physical contact, there's a lot of ways. Yoga is good. And so, for example, this is another way. You could see here more resources all about oxytocin. For example, you'll get 34 ways to increase it. And so there's more things that you could do. We give you some of the best things that we think are related to it, but essentially you really want to look at these things in a holistic way. You want to put the pieces together, and you want to realize that it's not, these are biochemical things. You need to fix these things in a biochemical way. So here, yeah, and often it's important to know sometimes when we put tryptophan, 5-HTP is also good for it. Sometimes we'll just do tryptophan just because we want, some people like, dealing with some issues with their diet, but I personally take 5-HTP. That's better. I think this gene is important for me, actually. I notice benefit with a lot of the things that help with this gene. And so, but yeah, we have a lot of information. You could always look about all about GSK3 beta. There's a lot of more resources that you could look at, and that's very important to know about. So let's see what this one is. This is the serotonin 2A gene, and you could see that it comes up. It explains what the gene is all about. It shows my SNPs, and then it shows my personalized summary, my personalized recommendations, and you could see, and I do all these recommendations. And so, but I enjoy just knowing about my body. If I don't have time, I'll just look at the prioritized recommendations. So yeah, that's very important to realize. I'm going to stop sharing now so we can do more, try to get through more questions. What can I take to help stop taking benzos? That's a very tough one. And that's something that, that's a medical issue, basically. Things that increase GABA in general should be good for that. But that's something that, I think is like, it's something that needs to be in coordination with your doctor and probably a professional. I don't think that that's something you want to do on your own. What do you think about that, Dr. Greg?
Yeah, it's not something you want to mess around. I would definitely, and they have, programs for that, for kind of tapering off. And, I'll just put this out there. Anxiety is not a benzodiazepine deficiency. And so you want to make sure that you're treating the cause. And then if somebody, unfortunately, sometimes if you go to your doctor and I have anxiety, I'll hear some meds. And that, I'll find is sometimes people are on a bunch of different meds for their conditions and it's not treating the cause. And part of the issue is trying to work around the meds. And so I think if you want to come down off of some of the meds, talking with your doctor, having a program so that you can kind of taper off. And I'm going to go back to the self-hack post. You see all those references there. If you're finding this stuff and you go to your doctor and you're saying, "Oh, I saw some of this stuff," bring some of that info there, bring some of the references there. All those little numbers, those are studies. This has all been studied and scientifically proven. So bring that evidence to your doctor and show, well, you know, I saw magnesium can actually help with this. Should I have magnesium? And so, you know, kind of provide that evidence, because I think it's really important that you have a game plan, that you're not just on benzos the rest of your life. So I think having and doing it carefully, because it can be detrimental to your health if you go off too quick. So just have a game plan, talk with your doctor, and yeah.
Okay, so do you think genetic testing works alongside the Dutch testing? I think lab tests in general, we do accept. So SelfDecode has the lab testing feature built in there. So if you know, sometimes anxiety could be hormonal, for example, and things like a Dutch test may be good, right? Or you can get other. You know, you could also check your hormones with regular lab tests, but I think that it's always best to have as much of a full picture as possible. Genetics is one of the things, right? That's why you want to look at a whole bunch of things like lab tests. You don't, the more of a holistic picture you have, the better, right? So what do you think about that, Dr. Greg?
So there is lots of things that can actually inhibit some of those enzymes, and the Dutch labs test, so someone understands, is like dozens, probably 40 different metabolites of different estrogen, cortisol, testosterone. And so, but lots of things can inhibit those enzymes. And so what happens is, if you don't know your genetics and you get a Dutch labs done and you see something's off, you don't know, is that a genetic variant, or am I being exposed to something that's actually decreasing it? So this is where you build the full picture. Get the genetics, do the environmental testing, and then get the hormone testing. And then you can kind of put together the full picture to understand what's going on.
So somebody asked, I'm in the UK, does SelfDecode testing can they use SelfDecode for testing instead of 23andMe? Absolutely. We do international shipping. And as we mentioned before, COM20, you can use the code COM20, and that would get you 20% off. Who developed the program? We're a team of 40 people. We have, 15 developers. We have dozen scientists, and so we all work together to create this program to try to create the best recommendations for people, and to based on their genetics, lab tests, and environmental factors, and also based on most importantly, we also look at what the science says for what are the best natural therapies. Okay. Is there a component that can help determine which drugs would have the best or worst interactions? Not yet. That's something we would like to work on in the future. And with trauma, the limbic system is affected. Okay. Okay. So that's pretty much, I think we got through most of the questions on Zoom, and we're going to be wrapping up about now. And that's pretty much it. I think, thank you everyone for coming. And again, if the code is COM20, and we're very interested in helping as many people out as we can. Hopefully we'll do more of these webinars and we can answer more questions. I just don't want to go over, we're already 22 minutes over, but we really, I wanted to, I like to answer people's questions. So thank you everyone very much. And, I wish you the best and hope your anxiety is able to be overcome. Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.